Some of you have voiced your concerns with butt wink. Now, butt wink is just some normal spinal rounding that happens when your hips flex. I've described this before. Anytime you hinge forward or flex at the hips, your spine is going to round. And when you squat, that looks like butt wink. This is just normal human movement, and it's a sign of squatting deep enough. The only way to truly eliminate butt wink is if you quarter squat, and that's a terrible solution. So straight up, you shouldn't really be concerned about it. But there are some factors that may be leading to excessive butt wink. And I say excessive in quotations because it is totally subjective. However, sometimes that butt wink can be a sign of inefficient movement or a sign of you not squatting the way that's best for yourself. One of the biggest factors increasing butt wink that I find with my patients and clients is that they've been taught to keep their back in neutral. And they do so by keeping their chest up and pushing their butt back. The dangers of these cues are very weak and very uncomfortable squats. And ironically, it actually takes their back out of neutral and puts it into extension. It also increases the hip flexion angle by tilting the pelvis forward so that when they do hit some depth and they do go into that flexion, which is inevitable, their butt wink looks massive because now they're going from extension to flexion instead of just neutral to flexion. So again, ironically, it's actually increasing their butt wink. The butt wink itself isn't necessarily bad, but that massive change in positioning can sometimes lead to them getting out of position and having a weaker squat on the way up. Now, sadly, they've learned these cues from some people online who claim that they're a university for squatting, or bad trainers who don't truly understand the biomechanics of the body. This is why it's important to understand how the body moves and what is normal movement and not demonize it. Sorry, I was getting a little heated there. A very simple fix for this is to just cue tucking your pelvis under a little bit before you start, getting a good brace, and then letting your chest fall towards the ground as you squat down. This leads to more consistent positioning in the squat, as well as not going from extension to flexion, so it decreases the total amount of extraneous movement during your squat. This will lead to a more consistent and stronger squat. And if you're really concerned about how your booty cheeks look, then it'll also decrease your butt wink. Some other cues that can help with this are to widen your stance, point your toes out, and not flex your feet. Starting with the feet, by flexing them, you're not letting your feet actually collapse, which is normal movement, and allows for more ankle dorsiflexion. If you're flexing your foot, your knee can't travel as far forward, so the demands to get a deep squat fall more on your hips. And that leads to a less balanced approach in the squat and going to increase that hip flexion angle and increase the amount of butt wink you have. Again, the butt wink isn't bad, but it can be a sign that you're not moving efficiently for you. And most people don't have the hip structure to be comfortable in that narrow stance, toes forward position for the squat. This was just based on some dude who squatted like that and was surrounded by a few people who also squatted like that. So he said, hey, this is the best way to squat. But guess what? It's not actually the best way to squat. So if you don't have the joint structure to allow for that kind of squatting, your body's going to compensate to stay balanced or to hit the depth by rounding at the spine. Like I said, most people don't have the hip structure for this, so what happens is your hips kind of end up running out of room or jamming up, however you want to look at it, when you get close to hitting depth. Since those hip flexion demands or internal rotation demands too, I'll get to that soon, are a little bit too much, your body responds by flexing at the spine to decrease the demands on your hips. And like I stated earlier, that butt wink is just that normal spinal flexion. So if your back is rounding to kind of stay balanced or get you in a more comfortable position, then you're going to see that butt wink. Again, all you have to do is just change your stance, widen it, point your toes out, find one that works well for you so that you can hit depth without running out of room at the hip. And a related point to the hips is that they need to internally rotate as you get close to depth. This is normal movement and it's good for you, so don't try to fight it. And if you can't really internally rotate all that well, then you can work on that movement and try to increase it, and it'll help you comfortably hit depth. There are some people that just don't have that much internal rotation and they won't be able to get that much internal rotation. That's perfectly normal. And it's probably going to be advantageous to you for you to find a position where those internal rotation demands are decreased a little bit, or it puts you in a more slightly externally rotated position at the start so that when you get to the bottom, relatively you have more internal rotation that you can dip into. This will allow you to be more comfortable and stronger with your squat. So all in all, butt wink is not a bad movement and you should just embrace it. It's going to happen anyway, but if you're having excessive butt wink, again, that's totally subjective, then it may be a sign that you're not squatting in the most efficient or most comfortable position for you. So just play around with your stance a little bit, look at some different cues, try not to be so extended, and your squat will feel a lot better and you'll move a lot more weight. I hope you found this helpful and learned something. Thanks for watching. Now go out there and make some gains.